It's the end of the indie world as Nintendo's final 2019 presentation, unless they pull some end-of-the-year direct magic, is now in the books with today's Nindy presentation done and delivered. What did we think of it? What games stood out? Well, I want to know from you as well. I'm going to give you my take, but make sure to give me yours. Which game are you most excited to play? Let me know in the comments down below. Hit that like button if you love that Nintendo gave us one more show before we close 2019, and let me know if you think they could possibly deliver one more. But goodness gracious, today's indie world, it was definitely an indie world, and I am going to say something that it's kind of taboo to say that Nintendo stuff stinks, but I'm going to be honest with you and say what I think a lot of people are thinking but probably don't want to say. Today's indie world was the worst indie presentation of the Switch era. Now, that's not to say there weren't some cool moments. The announcement of Axiom Verge 2 and all the success that Tom Happ has had is fantastic. Sports Story looks super cool, getting a sequel to one of the early Switch indie darlings, incorporating now tennis and soccer, volleyball, fishing is going to be awesome when that finally hits in mid-2020. Stealth drops of Talos Principle and Dauntless are nice skits, but everything else just fell very flat for me. And I think we're running into a strange problem with these indie world presentations that, if I try to articulate, it is really twofold. The first major issue I have with these presentations is, why does Nintendo refuse to touch on games already announced? Why do they refuse to ever double dip on something like Hollow Knight Silksong, Super Meat Boy Forever, Eastward? Why don't they give us another look at some of the games we were most excited for from past indie worlds, from past Nindies presentations? On one hand, you could say, well, this is cool because Nintendo isn't wasting time on things we already know about. Instead, they're just going full steam ahead with new projects. But a lot of these feel like filler. Previously, if Nintendo was touting a title, it was a first-party exclusive that they believed in, or a first-party partnership that they really felt strongly about. But now with so many different shows and so many opportunities to market a vast array of games, it's hard to know if the stamp of Nintendo quality is actually on these games or not. Is it that they believe firmly in the quality of these titles, or they just are filling out a show because they don't have a lot announced for 2020? And that's why I think this one stung a little more, because we do know so little about their games lineup for 2020, specifically their big box titles outside of Animal Crossing the ports. What else is there? And this is what you show. Obviously, we know that Hollow Knight, Silksong, Super Meat Boy Forever, Eastward are still coming, so why not emphasize those very awesome-looking indies? We can't buy everything. We're probably going to buy those three. So do we have room to buy these others that look maybe not as cool? It's obviously impossible to predict. Perhaps Skatebird goes down as the best game of 2020, and we're talking about Dreamscaper as the game of the year this time next winter. But I don't know that I buy that. It's unfortunate to say many of these games look mediocre and really seem like titles that will hit the eShop and then be buried. There's so much on that eShop. There's so freaking much. So the second part is that there just is so much, and I don't know if that's always a great thing. Nintendo doesn't seem to want to aggressively curate their storefront, and that's their own choice. But we've been asking and anticipating that for a while to help us sift through some of these titles. And when the Indie World presentations come out here and throw out titles, it's so hard to know if they're going to be quality. It is so frustrating for me to watch these at times because I cannot tell the difference between a Katana Zero and a dud. With these 2D sprite-based games, it is so hard in a 30 to 60 second trailer to try and decipher, without Nintendo's true seal of quality, without their true stamp of approval, if this game is the next big thing or if it is something that should be a hard pass. And then what is the deal with all of these games wanting to merge genres and try to couple a whole bunch of game styles into one? I thought the idea of Dreamscaper sounded very fantastic. It's exploring mental health, something that we know Hellblade tackled in an excellent manner. But then they tell us that it has top-down shooter and it has brawler and it has puzzle, and it's like, why are you trying to bite off so much? So many games are genre-bending, genre-merging titles. Boyfriend Dungeon, the boyfriend genre with the dungeon-crawling RPG genre. Team 17 gets up there and says, hey, we got a new game that merges crafting, base building, survival. Like, isn't that every game ever now? And they announced the Survivalist, which looks pretty cool, but is it just doing so much that nothing will stand out? One of my highlights was probably Liberated. I think that game looks really cool. But again, I do not know if that is the second coming of Katana Zero, or if it is one that I shouldn't even be excited for. And I think that excitement is another tough thing to manage with these presentations. You get a game announced like Hollow Knight or Super Meat Boy Forever, Eastward, and you have no freaking clue when it is going to come out. Delays are inevitable. Game devs should take their time. Indie studios have it a little bit harder because they don't have as much money or manpower to work with. But when you present games in this way and they get one shot to shine, I applaud Nintendo for putting the spotlight on smaller developers that otherwise probably would not get any limelight. But when you don't know that there's no set date, there's no set price, these games may be delayed into 2021, they may be delayed into a different quarter, a different half. It's like, does the bump that they get today really pay off in the long run? And I don't have statistics on that. It must, because they continue to do it in this way. But I feel like so many of these games will be forgotten by the time they come out because Nintendo refuses to touch on them again. And you end up having this sort of cycle where a new game in the same kind of genre and space replaces the last game revealed, and I wonder if it just is cannibalizing the sales and the spotlight over and over again. A prime example is in the last Indie World presentation that I keep wanting to call Nindies, but they're now Indie Worlds. They showed off a game called Skater XL, and in this Indie World they show off Skatebird. Now, I don't know when Skater XL is coming out. I don't know if any more information is dropped. I sure have not heard about it. Heck, I think there's people that didn't even know Super Meat Boy Forever wasn't out because that initially was talked about so long ago. I had someone comment and say that they hoped that the new Shovel Knight game would be stealth dropped today. Guess what? It came out today. So there clearly is some issue with Nintendo's messaging, and the smorgasbord of indie games, while very cool and providing a little bit of fun for everyone, it is daunting to sift through. Now, Dauntless wins because it's free to play, and they add to the already awesome establishment of free to play titles on Switch. You got Warframe, Fortnite, you know the works. Murder by Numbers looks kind of cool. It is this mashup of interesting art, Hotel Dusk vibes, and Picross type puzzles, but there's no sense of if this will be great or terrible. And now you never know if a game is going to be awesome or not, and making assumptions, you know what that does. But it sure doesn't seem like Nintendo firmly believes that these are going to be the best indie games of next year. Let's look at Bake & Switch, which, by the way, I want to give a special shout out to all the developers that had to prep those awkward intro videos for their games. I'm sure Nintendo requested that, and some of them looked terrified, but kudos to them because they did a good job, and that's got to be so scary to get out there and talk about your game in front of such a large audience and have to send it to Nintendo and hope that they like it. But Bake & Switch is this Overcooked inspired title that they said was their own original idea, that they wanted to combine food with couch co-op and multiplayer in this quirky new game where you're sacrificing food to a bigger food monster. It sounds so much like Overcooked. It looks so much like Overcooked. There aren't recipes, but it's basically taking the success of Overcooked and trying to replicate it with a different style game in the same general genre and motif. And I think that it looks not great. Maybe I'm colored corrected, and Bake & Switch is the highlight of next summer. But does Nintendo really think this is the next Celeste? Every game cannot be a star-studded Game of the Year contender, but I would rather see them spend time and give us another look at the titles that maybe they do believe more in, maybe are farther along in development and they can see something special there. Instead, we just get this list. And I wonder if next year, a super important year for gaming, 2020, when we're getting 2 new consoles, brand new generation, and inevitably tons of tentpole titles to power those expensive machines, if this scattershot indie approach does come back to frustrate some other people as well. Because when Nintendo is not talking about their third-party partnerships or their first-party titles, they have to talk about something, and they talk about indies. And it has been the thrusting force of the system. But as the game count reaches 2,000 and 3,000, and it's harder and harder to pick apart the stellar from the subpar, do people start to get annoyed that Nintendo is kind of covering up their lack of entrees with appetizers? It's one thing to have a whole bunch of options, but when you are missing the main courses, it can become a bit annoying. So yeah, there's people that are going to love Streets of Rage 4, but a title like Gleamlight, it kind of looks like Hollow Knight. It almost even sounds like Hollow Knight. It's doing some interesting things. No UI, no words. I love that line. My favorite line of any Nintendo presentation 2019. Words, who needs them? That was great. But why not show us Hollow Knight Silksong? Because inevitably that game is going to be better. Team Cherry is renowned at this point. And that's no slight to Gleamlight, but for the fans of Switch, wouldn't they rather know that Silksong is coming at some point? Or at least get another look, another trailer? Don't you want to hype up your system with the best games possible to encourage sales and satiate your already existing user base? Super Mash to me was the best, the epicenter of this presentation. It is a game where you are mashing up games to create games, and in the trailer, they say that some of those games will be terrible. Now, if this is a $5, $7 game, it might be interesting. You get to pick JRPG and platformer, you get to pick stealth and shoot 'em up, and find maybe some quirky creation that's kind of fun for a few minutes. But when the developer themselves admits that some of the games created within the game are going to be terrible, it just shows you that the genre mashup style has kind of been overdone. It's so hard to do one thing right. Why are you trying to chew on 10? Just do one. And I appreciate the Talos Principle coming. It's basically The Witness 0.75. It's like almost as good as The Witness. It's still cool in its own right. I wish it was The Witness, but I still like Talos Principle. That's out today. Dauntless is a free-to-play title that has exclusive Switch content, which is really nice and really cool of them. Stranger's Wrath is a fun game from 2 generations ago, coming in January. So many of these games, though, late 2020. Like, why are you talking about it? Super Meat Boy Forever has to be nearer than Skatebird, and yet they don't include it. And obviously there's behind the scenes that has to go on between these companies, between these developers, but there seems to be a strategy at Nintendo that if you talk about it once, you don't talk about it again. And Axiom Verge 2 is very cool. Axiom Verge is a fantastic title, but it doesn't really move the needle that much for me, personally. It's another one of those games. And I kind of wish that these were structured in a way to provide more variety, more emphasis on the bigger, the more desired titles, and maybe, just maybe, double dip a little bit, Nintendo. It's okay. We can hear about some of these games a few times. You sure talk about your AAA titles many, many, many times. Why not give that same due diligence to the indies? I don't know. I hope that they're able to kind of rework the structure of these Nindy presentations in 2020 and maybe focus on games that are coming out sooner. Maybe have a special page on the eShop for games specifically mentioned in Indie World presentation so we remember them when they come out. If I went back and read you the list of games from the March and May Indie Directs, you wouldn't remember half of them. I guarantee you won't be able to describe what half of those games are. I can't do it. And I do this daily for a living. So we're in a weird spot, but enough of that. I really like the look of Sportster. I think that game is going to be awesome. I'm glad Dauntless is here. Honestly, Murder by Numbers seems kind of cool. Liberated could be the new Inside, the new Katana Zero. And, you know, you got to be allured by Boyfriend Dungeon, which is just the weirdest mashup of all. Let me know your take in the comments down below. How do you feel about these indie presentations? Which games were most exciting to you? And what do you want to see different in 2020? Thanks for being here, guys and girls. I appreciate you so much. By the way, if you made it to this point in the video, Joseph was supposed to be on the video, but his audio screwed up twice, so we weren't able to get that rendered out. But we will have some discussions between the both of us coming soon. Until that time, thanks again, everybody. I love you a lot. Have a fantastic day. Until next time, Switch Force, out.